Well, let's discuss now what this all might mean for the upcoming US presidential election. I'm delighted to say that I'm joined now by the polling guru, Frank Luntz. Frank, very good morning to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. And by the way, there are two words I want you to consider, because they're the words that Donald Trump emailed as this whole thing was going on in the last 24 hours. Political prisoner. That's what he's calling himself. And that's what's so significant for Sky News viewers, is that all this has done is divided America even further. The Trump people, we see no evidence in the two focus groups I did last night, no evidence that people have moved away from Donald Trump, no evidence that they've moved towards him. The undecided just maybe giving Joe Biden another look. It's too close to call, but I say this as someone who's been an observer for 35 years of American politics. I've never seen it so polarized and so toxic as it is this morning.
Which is fascinating to hear you say, Frank, and of course will bring us to the topic of turnout in a moment. But if we can just dwell on those people in the middle that you're alluding to that maybe haven't been that affected by this or any news, just talk us through this trial as a whole over the last 2 months as we were hearing the arguments. How was it affecting those people in the middle? Did it affect them at all? And do you think the criminal conviction itself will add or detract from that?
So for the most part, what we saw by people in the middle is that they thought Donald Trump was guilty. But they also think that this was not necessarily a case that should have been brought. They do not believe that he should be given prison time. And they think of this as being insignificant. There are other charges against Trump that will not be heard before the election. Those are the ones that the people in the middle care most about. And in the end, you actually have the possibility of seeing suppressed voting, because the opposite of love isn't hate, it's indifference. And for those people in the middle, they don't like Joe Biden because of his age. They don't like Donald Trump because of his behavior. They're not convinced about Robert Kennedy Jr., the third party candidate. So in the end, they don't see that they've got any place to go, anyone to vote for, and it's very frustrating for them.
So well, let's just explore that a bit further. If turnout is lower than normal, does that favour Donald Trump because his base is so likely to turn out either way?
Yes, it does. That's a very good insight, that Donald Trump's voters are going to vote come hell or high water. They're going to vote through rain, sleet, snow. It doesn't matter. And it's one of the reasons why Trump raised more money online in the last 12 hours than any candidate has ever done in the history of American politics. People are donating to him. They're showing their support of him. But in the end, for that undecided, there are people who simply don't want to vote for a presidential candidate who's been found guilty of a felony. And Trump was found guilty of every one of these charges. So there's stuff for Joe Biden that's helpful in all of this, the anger towards Trump. There's stuff for Donald Trump that defends his position that he's a victim. In the end, the only big loser, I think, is the American people, who frankly have had enough of this circus and desperately wants to return to normalcy.
So let's just go a bit more into detail on the conviction last night. 34 counts of falsifying business records. There's still some moving parts, of course, specifically with this case. Firstly, the sentencing. If he's given jail time, does that help or hinder him? What's your view on that?
If he's given jail time, he becomes a martyr. And if he's given jail time, what our focus group respondents said is they're afraid that there'll be protests, riots in the street, that there is real concern that the results of this case could bring a level of violence that we haven't seen ever in American democracy. And second, just the fact that he's been found guilty of 34 felonies is something that we're not used to. And that the public is looking at this, shrugging their shoulders and saying, how the hell did we get here?
Well, that's for sure. The other kind of nuance, I think, on this case is when it goes to appeal, and that obviously might take quite some time. But if it's overturned, what does that? How does that influence how things poll in the US?
If it's overturned, now remember, there are only 7 states. I want to emphasize this. There are only 7 states are in play, and you can write them down: Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, in the industrial states, the 2 southern states, North Carolina and Georgia, and 2 western states, Arizona and Nevada. Only 4% of those 7 states are undecided. So we're looking at the entire election in America determined by less than 1% of the vote. And so we're watching those people with a laser-like focus, and to them, this whole thing is unseemly. They do believe that Donald Trump did something wrong. They don't believe he did something so wrong that he belongs in prison. And frankly, they want to focus on the policies, immigration, inflation, and abortion, rather than focusing on whether Donald Trump paid or did not pay a porn star.
So let's dive into that a little bit, and if we can flip through not maybe the 7 states, but the 3 groupings. If we do Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, the industrial states before, which obviously he won in 2016, Biden won them back in 2020. What's your assessment of where we stand in the polling in those states at the moment?
The key vote there is union membership. And the fascinating thing for pollsters like me is that the union leadership is about 90% for Donald Trump, but the membership, take out government unions and teachers unions, and Donald Trump is drawn even with Joe Biden among the rank and file union membership. That is a big deal. And that's the reason why Trump is either tied or winning slightly in those 3 states.
And when you look at those polls at the moment, I mean, I know every poll, even the night before election, comes with a pinch of salt. This far out, is it kind of futile us looking so closely at them, or are you getting readings there that do make you think that, you know, it's possible he's going to win those 3 back?
What I don't care about is the national numbers. I've actually stopped looking at them because they don't matter. I'm watching state by state because they do. There are 3 groups that Trump is doing surprisingly well among: rank and file union members, Hispanics and Latinos, who are factors in all 3 states. They've moved towards Trump. And young black men under age 40 are giving Trump a second look. They like his approach. They like his swagger. And if any of those 3 groups, if 2 of those 3 groups stay with him, that will counter the upper middle class female, 35 to 54, in suburban America, who has shifted away from Donald Trump and towards Joe Biden, frankly, not because Biden is successful, because they're fed up with Trump's attitude and his presentation. The thing that I'm watching is what happens after the first debate. If Donald Trump just is rude and abusive, you lose those female voters that Trump needs. And right now they have left him for Joe Biden. However, if he is focused on inflation, immigration, and abortion, those are the only 3 issues that really matter. Those are the issues that he could potentially be reinstated as president.
Maybe we've covered some of the issues already, but just talk us through those other 2 groupings of states. So the southern states and then the western states. What's your reading on those at the moment?
So that's where the African-American vote matters. North Carolina and Georgia. Democrats are used to getting over 90% of that vote. There's some polling that shows Democrats in the upper 70s or low 80s. That's a big shift. And because the black population is so large there, that could be a 1-point advantage for Trump, and that's all that's needed. In Nevada and Arizona, it's the Latino, Hispanic votes. And that vote normally votes Democrat by about a 15% margin. Trump and Biden are almost even there. That's why those states now have given Trump a 5, 6, 7-point lead, and that's beyond the margin of error. So those states look like they're going to end up in Trump's camp. By the way,
let's touch.
Let me give you something that's going to blow your mind. If Trump wins 4 of those 7 states, Arizona, Nevada, North Carolina, and Georgia, and he's up among all of those, he ends up with 268 electoral votes. If Biden's able to win all 3 of those industrial states, it'll be 272 to 268, and we're going to have just a melee in America.
Although at least the person in power is different, perhaps, compared to last time round as we approach inauguration. You mentioned the debate, which the first of which, very oddly, is before even the conventions. It's coming in late June. I forget the exact date, but it's soon. How significant could that be?
most significant debate in American history, even more important than Nixon Kennedy back in 1960. Everyone's going to be watching. Everyone's going to create a drinking game. The number of times that Joe Biden says hyperbole, you have to drink. The number of times Donald Trump says rigged election, you'll have to drink. That debate will be watched even by those who don't care much about politics. They'll watch it for the show, they'll watch it for the performance, but they will watch. And that debate, I believe, will be the most, even more important than this finding yesterday in the New York courtroom. I think that first debate's going to determine the next president of the United States.
And just want to come back to the top issues, Frank. Obviously, as you know, we've got an election taking place here, and the economy is part of the debate. The economy has been less resilient here as it has been in the US. What's common in both countries is inflation. I mean, to what extent is that, even though the GDP figures in the US have been pretty impressive, certainly compared to Europe and the UK, to what extent is that an issue that Joe Biden is really struggling to shake off, regardless of all these other crazy factors that we've just been discussing? Does it come back to the economy ultimately?
Yes, and it comes back to affordability, not the economy, not inflation. Can I afford food and fuel? Over here, you call it petrol. Can I afford a home? And in America, can I afford health care? Affordability, having to sacrifice because I can't make ends meet at the end of the week or end of the month, is the single most important issue in the UK and the US. And it is hurting significantly both incumbent parties. The conservatives are being punished. I know the rates are down. I know that the conservatives are going to be upset over what I say here. Yes, the inflation rate is down, but the average Brit doesn't feel it. Yes, the inflation rate has been fixed in the US, but the average American still goes back to 3-4 years ago. They know they're paying more, and they blame the people in power for that. Nothing matters more to the electorate than affordability.
And Frank, final word. Just, I know you don't like calling something that's 5 or 6 months away, but put a different way, if the vote was tomorrow, who would win?
If you asked me this 24 hours ago, I would have said Trump, and I would have added all sorts of caveats. Based on my 2 focus groups for the New York Times and for actually it's going to air over here, I can't call it now because we don't know what the fallout's going to be from this trial. I'm not ducking the question. I'm a pollster. I need to get it right, and it is simply too close to call.